This is the first in a series of interviews of veterans of Nolensville area, Tennessee. And we're starting with veterans of World War II. And I have here with me James O. Oliver, veteran of the Army.
That is correct.
Okay. And where were you inducted?
I lived in Cadiz, Kentucky. That's C-A-D-I-Z.
Okay. And why did you get in the Army?
At that time, the draft was in effect.
Yes.
I registered for the draft on January 7, 46. On February 7th, well, let me back up a bit. Within 2 weeks, maybe 3, I got a greetings from Harry S. Truman, President, informing me to be in Louisville, Kentucky on February the 7th for my physical. So I did that, and then another month, a month and a half, I received orders to go to Camp Atterbury, Indiana for an induction. And so I was in there because of the draft.
Okay. And so you were there from when to when?
I was there in April of 46 until October of 47.
Okay. What went on at Camp Atterbury?
It was an interesting place. I don't think it exists anymore. I don't think it does. But I was surprised when I got there. It was covered up with German POWs.
Okay.
And so I had no connection with them. But anyway, that's where I was inducted and got my issue of uniforms, and then got my orders in for further training. And so we went from Camp Atterbury, Indiana, on troop trains, which you don't see anymore. And we didn't know where we were going. They didn't tell you much back then. Anyway, we got 2 or 3 days, ended up in Lake Charles, Louisiana, which is just outside of, now known as Fort Polk. At that time it was Camp Polk. And was there for a few weeks from the basic training in April, May, in that area. And it was hot. And so this is, went through the basic training, and then from there I got orders to go to Fort Dix, New Jersey for shipment overseas. Of course, went by train, and it was in the summertime. And of course, at that time, trains were pulled by steam engines. They burned coal, and it was hot, and the cars at that time were not air conditioned, so all the windows were down. And by the time you got to your destination, well, in the meantime, I went home for a few days, and then on Fort Dix. But as I was leading up to, you ended up with coal soot all over you. And so went to Fort Dix, New Jersey, and we assumed that we were going to Europe. And I don't know how many, a few days at Fort Dix, we went into New York City and boarded a troop ship, still thinking we were going to Europe. So we took off from the New York harbor, and a few days at sea, they put out a newsletter sheet such as this, and they noted that trading our route from New York, we were going down the East Coast. And so still didn't know where we're going. A few days later, we were in the Panama Canal. And in one of the places where we had to wait for the water to rise, or anyway, General Eisenhower happened to be in Panama at that time, and he zoomed up on the dock in his Cadillac convertible and stood up and made a speech. How proud he was of us, and, the usual. And anyway, we went on through the Panama Canal, still not knowing where we were going. And a few days later, maybe a week at sea, we landed in Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. And from there, we went to a small camp back in the jungles and stayed there for a week, maybe 2 weeks. And they loaded us back on a troop ship. And we still didn't know where we were going. So we left Pearl Harbor, and we could tell we were going west. And interesting thing is that somewhere out there we crossed the international date line, and you went from either Tuesday to Wednesday, to Thursday, or maybe it's the other way around. You went from Tuesday and then another Tuesday. Anyway, that's where the date line is. And we crossed that, and we got a little certificate showing that we crossed the international date line. And so we ended up there at Guam. And Guam is one of the 3 islands of the Marianas. In fact, Tinian was one of the islands. That's where the General, I was thinking General Doolittle, but he was a colonel at the time he dropped the bomb, wasn't he? He took off from Tinian, but I've never owned that island. But anyway, they after a few days in Guam, we boarded another ship and went to Saipan. And at Saipan, now we weren't being transferred as a unit. We were transferred as individuals. And we had people going two different branches. And got to Saipan, I was assigned to the quartermaster depot. And that's where all of the equipment is still there. And we were charged with responsibility of shipping that stuff out. And that's where my, I noted here there's a heavy equipment operator. That's where I picked it up. I wasn't trained for that, but I could operate a lift and bulldozer, and one of the things that I really not many people know about them, but they had tank retrievers, and I assume that whenever they stormed the beach, that if a tank got stuck out there, they had a tank retriever that would pull it out. That was huge, maybe 10 feet wide, 15, 20 feet long, with big, huge engines, and I could operate that. And in fact, it almost got me in trouble one time. I was running out of gas, and I got out on the highway and going to the depot to get some gas. The MPs pulled me over. And I wasn't supposed to be on the highway with that tracked equipment. But anyway, my captain says, just don't do it anymore. So anyway, that is, I operated a semi-tractor trailer, hauling stuff to the dock, putting it on ships, and I don't know what they did with it. May have taken it out there and dumped it in the sea. I don't know. But anyway, that's basically what I did there, and I spent about a year, maybe a little bit more, there doing that particular thing, and in fact, I was surprised that I had to have a driver's license. And so I took a driver's test in a 2.5 ton 10-wheeler. And one good thing about that is the fact that once I got back, I went to the state and got my state driver's license without taking a test. And to this day, I've never taken a driver's test or a state license. Anyway.
Did you have to parallel park that thing?
Yeah. But it was fun. After looking back, the camp is a Quonset huts, and our shower was a water tank on stilts, setting up, and it was heated by the sun. So if you took a shower in the middle of the day, now this was wide open. There's no women there at that time. Anyway, if you took a shower in the middle of the day, you got warm water. But if you waited till after sun went down, it was cold. And that was the that's the highlights of what I did there. They after a year or so there, again, boarded ship, went to Guam, and then from there back to, I believe it's Fort Ord, California. And that's where I was discharged. And they put me on a train again to go back to Kentucky. And so that kind of ended that stint with the military.
Okay. Where did you get off the train?
And I believe it was in Hopkinsville,
Hopkinsville,
Kentucky.
Kentucky. Okay.
The train ride was 3 or 4 days, and but of course I had no way of letting my family know, and so I hitchhiked me a ride home.
Okay. Did you have any civilian clothes?
No.
None at all. You
No.
hadn't had civilian clothes for how long?
Well, after I was discharged and got home, got my civilian clothes, and but up to then, all I had was the uniforms. Now in Saipan, it wasn't, uniforms weren't too important as to being pressed and everything. We just sometimes just fatigues the pants, no shirt. It was then when I got out, then I had to buy civilian clothes and transportation, and because before I went in, I had nothing. I mean, what I did was what my parents provided, and then after getting out, I was on my own. I had to do something. A few weeks, maybe a couple of weeks after I got back, my mother arranged to have a gathering at a public spring area, and that's basically the homecoming. And of course, I had to go to work, make some money.
Where'd you go to work?
Of course, at the time, I didn't have much education. I went to work for a construction company, driving a dump truck. At that time, most of the county roads within 50, 100 miles, most of the county roads were gravel. And so this construction company I worked for did a lot of graveling roads. And I did that. And then in the meantime, my family moved to Princeton, Kentucky. And then I went to work for a highway paving company at that time. And we just worked summertime and winter off. And then I went to, since I had some experience in driving semi-trailers, I got a job doing that. This guy had 3 or 4 rigs, and so I worked for him for a while. And that's about it until we get into the next section of my military experience.
Okay, you came back in the 1950s, but what brought you to the Nashville area?
Okay, that is basically part of my re-entering the military in the 50s. I got out at that time, and the Veterans Administration contacted me, wanted to know if I wanted to use a GI Bill and go to college. So I took them up on that, and I went to Bowling Green, Kentucky, and in 1956, I believe it was, and I went to school 12 months a year.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't take summers off. I took summer school classes. And so then I graduated in 59. I graduated within 3 years. During my senior year, a representative from a company here in Nashville came up there and interviewed a bunch of people. And I happened to be one of them. And so I never heard anything more about it till finally they called, said they wanted me to come to Nashville for an interview. So I did, and ended up in Nashville in August 1959, and been in this area ever since.
Okay. Now, I believe you had a romantic interlude there.
Well, yeah. As we kind of talk about that, she graduated from high school at the same time as I graduated from college. Neither one of us was able to go to the other's ceremony. And so, yeah, we ended up getting married, and we had, of course, we moved to Nashville. I was still in school whenever we got married. Then we moved to Nashville, and we had a son was born, and so I said, well, that's it, just one. There's no more. And so about 3 years later, she announced to me that she was expecting again. And and so we had a girl, and so we raising 2 kids, and in the meantime she had gone to work at the bank, and in 1980, when our daughter was 14, she would have told you 14 and a half. She was involved in a fatal automobile accident. And so now we just have the one son who lives over in Hendersonville. And
Do you have grandchildren?
yeah, I've got 3. A grandson who he thought college was unnecessary, and he works on automobiles. His sister, Catherine, is a student at Trevecca, and she's then they have there's another little one that came on later, little girl. So we've got 3 grandkids.
Okay. And we have your wife, Nancy, here. Nancy, would you come over and maybe put your chin right on Jim's shoulder
I can do that.
so we can introduce your wife?
Is this close enough?
Right there, there you go. Now look into the picture. Okay, thank you. Well, that's James Oliver. Don't have enough for applause here, I guess, so we'll have to, well, maybe we can.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.